Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Course of World History. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson, and today we're going to be looking at the fall of two empires, the collapse of both the Aztec and Inca empires in the Americas, thanks to the arrival of the Spaniards. Let's start with the Aztecs and Montezuma. Under Montezuma, the Aztecs were really hated. Like, their neighbors despised the Aztecs. They just couldn't do anything about them because the Aztecs were so militarily strong and so wealthy. Anybody tried to rise up and the Aztecs would smack them down. But according to a legend, a Mayan legend and Aztec legend, a pale-skinned god called Quetzalcoatl was destined to come from the east and destroy them. Here are some representations of Quetzalcoatl. This is one as well. He was supposed to have serpentine features. So there was this legend that the Aztecs would eventually be destroyed. When the Spaniards arrived in 1519, certain people got nervous about this. They didn't look all that serpentine, but they certainly did have that pale skin, which the legends had spoke of. Now, Hernan Cortes winds up being the leader of this group. He's called a conquistador or a conqueror, explorer. He's off to find wealth in the Americas. Now, the Maya, these subject people, these people who hate the Aztecs but were unable to overthrow them, well, they've heard this legend, and they share this legend with Hernan Cortes, and they tell him about Quetzalcoatl. And Cortes is a clever, cunning guy. He's going to use this. He also befriends a Mayan named Maltzin, who kind of conspires with them to use this legend to then trick the Aztec. So Cortes is going to kind of impersonate a representative of Quetzalcoatl. Now, Cortes does not have an army with him. He's got 800 soldiers, so he's got a large detachment. I guess you could call it an army, but it's a very small army. Whereas the Aztec Empire controls an empire of millions and millions of people. This is not an easy challenge for Cortes, but he is brazen, he is bold, he's going to go for it. Lacking the Spanish support. See, that's the other thing about Cortes. He's not supposed to be doing what he's doing. He was in Cuba under the leadership of the governor of Cuba, which was, Spanish controlled at this point. But the governor did not want him to go. He kind of went without permission. And when his men found out about this, Cortes gets nervous, doesn't want them to turn back because he knows he's going to be thrown in jail for leaving without permission with 800 men. So he orders the burning of his ships. His men now cannot get back to Cuba. Their only option is to stick with Cortes and hope that his actions kind of redeem their slipping out of Cuba the way they did. So Cortes goes to Tenochtitlan. Okay, if you're going to conquer an empire, you need to take its city, especially when that empire is so rooted in this city. He goes to Tenochtitlan at the invitation of Montezuma, because remember, he is a representative of Quetzalcoatl. Okay, he is a godlike figure. So Montezuma's kind of hedging his bets here. He says, "Oh yeah, if you're this god, come meet with us, find out that we're good people, don't destroy us." And Cortes accepts this, but he also fears a trick. He's worried about having his men so surrounded by potential enemies. So, being afraid that Montezuma is using this as a ploy to capture him, he instead captures Montezuma. And he will hold Montezuma as a hostage in Montezuma's own palace, surrounded by Aztecs. So Cortes has his hostage, but is surrounded. And while they're doing this, the Spanish go out and they loot the city. Okay? They tell the Aztecs, "We will kill your leader unless you hand over all of your gold, all of your silver." and he would send his men out into the city to collect gold and silver, all the while threatening Montezuma. But during a riot, while Montezuma is sent out onto a balcony to talk to the rioters and try to get them to calm down and not attack the palace, he himself is killed. And once he dies, the Spanish don't have their hostage anymore. They need to get out. So they load up what they can onto their horses. They charge out of that palace. They break out of Tenochtitlan and they flee. They've got some wealth, not everything they wanted, but they've got some wealth. But they have not defeated the empire, and now the empire is angry. So what happens next? Well, smallpox kind of takes care of it for them. As the Spanish flee and leave a lot of their wealth, they did leave behind smallpox because it had traveled with them as disease did. Cortes had some men who were sick. The sickness spreads, and now the Aztec have it. The problem is the Aztecs have far less immunity to this disease. While smallpox might kill 10% of Cortes's men, it cuts the Aztec population in half in a year. 10 months, and half the city of Tenochtitlan is killed, including military leaders, political leaders, farmers, everybody falls victim to this. And when Cortes returns a year later, he now has an army of Maya behind him. He says, the Aztecs are weak, their civilization is collapsing, their city is dying off. We can defeat them if we go now. And all these tributary people, the people who hated the Aztec rule, join with the Spanish. They march on Tenochtitlan, they overthrow the city, and they conquer the empire. Cortes is now in charge of Mexico. Now, let's look at the Inca, because what happens with the Aztec happens with the Inca in even more of an impressive way if you're looking at this from the point of view of what a single person can accomplish. This occurs 13 years after the conquest of the Aztecs. Again, it is a Spaniard. This time it's Francisco Pizarro. But instead of having 800 men, he's got 180, a far smaller group. The Inca controlled an empire which was geographically much larger than the Aztecs, along the Andes Mountains and the coasts of South America. And the Inca are also, their political leaders are much more liked. They don't have as many external enemies. But what they do have is they have smallpox. Because smallpox has moved from the Aztecs through the Maya, through Central America, and down into the Incan territory. The Inca and the Inca and the Aztecs never had direct contact with each other, but this disease is spreading. And once it hits the Inca, about half of them die, and this includes the king of the Inca, or what they would call the Inca of the Inca. Atahualpa then wins a civil war over leadership. Atahualpa was one of the king's sons, and the two kings' sons go to war with each other over who should take over the Incan Empire, and Atahualpa wins just as Pizarro is landing. So they had a disease kill half their people, a civil war then ravaged the rest of them, and then Pizarro shows up. And Atahualpa meets with Pizarro before he's even returned to his capital city. He's just defeated his brother. He's traveling the empire, and he hears about these Spaniards. He's like, oh, interesting people, let's go meet them. And Atahualpa goes to meet this Spaniard, not knowing what he's getting into. And the Spanish capture him and keep him as a hostage. The Inca then are forced to pay a ransom. They had two rooms that they had to fill, one with gold and fill one with silver, and they wouldn't have their king Atahualpa released until they did so. The Inca people fill the room. The Spaniards say, wow, they filled that room. And they filled it quickly. These people must be rich. We should conquer them. We don't want them to have a leader. So even though the ransom was paid, they kill Atahualpa. Now the Inca are without a leader again. They fall into this chaos again, where they're trying to figure out who should lead them in this response to the Spanish invasion, and chaos descends on the empire. The Inca were ravaged by disease. They had just fought a civil war. They lacked leadership, and Pizarro is able to capture their capital city in this chaos, again with just a few soldiers. Now, it takes 40 years for Spain to capture the rest of the empire and to fully defeat the Inca, but over time they are able to do this, and the Incan Empire falls to the Spanish. That's it for today, the fall of two empires and how the Spanish were able to do it with relatively few people and one devastating disease. I hope that you learned a little bit today, and I will see you next time. Farewell.